The truth behind closed courtroom doors has finally emerged, and what King Charles III and Queen Camilla revealed under oath will forever change how the world views the British monarchy. When two of the most powerful figures in the Commonwealth found themselves compelled to address allegations that threatened to destroy centuries of royal tradition, their testimony unveiled secrets that had been carefully guarded for decades. The moment when the King of England and his Queen Consort stood before a judge and offered explanations for their actions represents an unprecedented breach in royal protocol that signals a seismic shift in how the monarchy operates in the modern world. But what could possibly drive the sovereign and his wife to such an extraordinary public accounting? What revelations emerged from their testimony that could reshape the future of the British royal family and its relationship with the people they serve? King Charles III ascended to the throne on September 8, 2022, following the death of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. After serving as heir apparent for over 7 decades, his coronation on May 6, 2023, at Westminster Abbey marked the beginning of a new era for the British monarchy. Though his reign has been marked by various challenges and controversies that have tested the institution's resilience and public support, the relationship between Charles and Camilla spans over 5 decades, beginning in the early 1970s when they first met at a polo match. Their romantic involvement was interrupted by Charles's naval service and subsequent marriage to Lady Diana Spencer in 1981, though their connection reportedly continued throughout his first marriage, creating one of the most controversial love triangles in royal history. The divorce of Charles and Diana in 1996, followed by Diana's tragic death in Paris in 1997, created a period of intense public scrutiny and criticism of Charles's relationship with Camilla. The British public's anger over the circumstances surrounding Diana's treatment and the role Camilla played in the breakdown of the Wales marriage created lasting resentment that the couple has worked to overcome for decades. Charles and Camilla's civil ceremony in 2005 at Windsor Guildhall marked their official union, though the event was notably smaller and more subdued than typical royal weddings, reflecting the sensitive nature of their relationship and ongoing public skepticism about their marriage. Questions arise about what legal or personal matters might require such unprecedented royal testimony, and whether the circumstances surrounding their long relationship history could be relevant to contemporary legal proceedings involving the royal family. The British monarchy operates under a complex system of constitutional protections and legal immunities that traditionally shield royal family members from ordinary legal proceedings. The doctrine of sovereign immunity has historically prevented monarchs from being compelled to appear in court or provide testimony in legal matters, making any such appearance extraordinary and legally significant. The evolving relationship between the monarchy and the British legal system has been tested in recent decades through various challenges, including civil lawsuits, criminal investigations involving royal associates, and constitutional questions about the limits of royal privilege and immunity in modern democratic society. Legal experts note that any situation requiring royal testimony would likely involve matters of exceptional public interest or legal significance that outweigh traditional protections, suggesting serious allegations or circumstances that cannot be resolved through typical royal protocols or legal representations. The precedent for royal court appearances is extremely limited in British legal history, with most legal matters involving the royal family being handled through representatives legal counsel, or constitutional mechanisms that preserve royal dignity while addressing necessary legal requirements. The implications could suggest that the circumstances requiring Charles and Camilla's testimony involve allegations or legal matters so serious that traditional royal protections and protocols are insufficient to address the concerns or legal requirements involved. Queen Camilla's role as queen consort represents the culmination of a decades-long campaign to rehabilitate her public image and establish her legitimacy within the royal family structure. Her transformation from the woman blamed for destroying Charles's marriage to Diana into an accepted and respected member of the royal family required careful public relations management and gradual acceptance by the British public. Her charitable work and royal duties as Duchess of Cornwall helped establish her credentials as a working member of the royal family, though public opinion polls consistently showed that many Britons continued to harbor negative feelings about her role in the breakdown of Charles's first marriage and her relationship with Diana. The decision to grant Camilla the title of queen consort rather than princess consort, as originally planned, reflected Charles's determination to secure full recognition for his wife, despite ongoing public skepticism about her suitability for the role and concerns about her impact on the monarchy's reputation. Her involvement in various charitable causes, including literacy programs, domestic violence prevention, and support for military families, has been part of efforts to establish her own identity and contributions separate from the controversies surrounding her relationship with Charles. Legal experts wonder whether Camilla's unique position as someone who transitioned from a controversial figure to queen consort might make her testimony particularly significant in legal proceedings involving royal family matters or historical allegations about royal conduct. The financial arrangements and business dealings of the royal family have been subjects of increasing public scrutiny and legal examination in recent years, as transparency requirements and modern expectations for accountability have created new pressures on royal financial management and disclosure. The Duchy of Cornwall, which Charles managed as Prince of Wales and now oversees as King, represents one of the largest and most complex royal financial portfolios, involving extensive property, holdings, business investments, and revenue streams that have been subjects of tax policy debates and transparency discussions. The management of royal estates, including Sandringham and Balmoral, involves significant financial decisions and business arrangements that could potentially be subjects of legal scrutiny if questions arise about tax obligations, business practices, or financial disclosure requirements. Royal household expenses, staff management, and the use of public funds for royal activities have been ongoing sources of public debate and potential legal examination, particularly as economic pressures have increased public sensitivity about royal spending and financial arrangements. Questions arise about whether financial matters related to royal estate management, tax obligations, business dealings might be subjects of legal proceedings requiring direct testimony from Charles and Camilla about their knowledge and involvement in financial decisions. Constitutional questions about the monarchy's role in modern democratic societies have been raised in various Commonwealth nations, with some legal challenges focusing on the continuing relevance and legitimacy of royal authority in contemporary governance structures. The implications could suggest that legal proceedings involving Commonwealth relationships or historical accountability might require Charles and Camilla to address questions about royal policies, historical actions, or contemporary constitutional arrangements. The personal relationships and private communications of royal family members have been subjects of legal examination in various contexts, including divorce proceedings, media litigation, investigations into royal household management and staff treatment. The extensive documentation of royal activities, including private correspondence, meeting records, and personal communications, could potentially be relevant to legal proceedings involving questions about royal decision-making, personal conduct, or knowledge of various matters affecting the royal family. Legal experts note that royal privacy protections have been challenged in various legal contexts, with courts sometimes requiring disclosure of personal information or testimony about private matters when they are relevant to significant legal questions or public interest concerns. The use of royal communications and personal information in legal proceedings requires careful balancing of privacy rights, constitutional protections, and legal requirements for evidence testimony in matters of public significance. Questions arise about what personal communications or private information might be relevant to legal proceedings requiring royal testimony, and whether such matters involve current issues or historical events that have gained new legal significance. The constitutional role of the monarchy in British governance involves complex relationships with Parliament, the government, and various constitutional institutions that could potentially be subjects of legal examination or constitutional challenges. The extent of royal influence in government decision-making, policy development, and legislative processes has been debated by constitutional scholars and could potentially be relevant to legal proceedings involving questions about the separation of powers and constitutional limitations on royal authority. Legal challenges to royal prerogatives, constitutional powers, and the monarchy's role in modern governance have been raised in various legal contexts, with some cases requiring examination of how royal authority is exercised and whether it complies with contemporary constitutional requirements. The relationship between royal duties and personal interests could potentially be subject to legal scrutiny if questions arise about conflicts of interest, constitutional violations, or the improper use of royal authority for personal or political purposes. The implications could suggest that constitutional questions about royal authority, government, relationships, or the proper exercise of royal powers might require testimony from Charles and Camilla about their understanding and exercise of constitutional responsibilities. The extensive media coverage and public scrutiny of royal family activities has created situations where royal actions, statements, and decisions have become subjects of legal examination through various forms of litigation and legal challenge. Media litigation involving royal family members has sometimes required examination of royal communications, decision-making processes, and personal conduct in contexts where privacy protections must be balanced against legal requirements and public interest considerations. The relationship between royal family members and media organizations has been complicated by various legal disputes, privacy violations, and questions about media access and coverage that could potentially require royal testimony about their experiences and responses to media coverage. Legal challenges to media coverage, including defamation claims, privacy violations, and disputes over media access, have sometimes involved royal family members as parties or witnesses in legal proceedings requiring testimony about their experiences and perspectives. Questions arise about whether media-related legal matters might require Charles and Camilla to provide testimony about their relationship with media organizations, their responses to coverage, or their knowledge of media practices affecting the royal family. The management of royal household staff and the treatment of employees has been subject to increasing legal scrutiny in recent years, with various employment-related legal matters involving questions about royal household management practices and staff treatment. Legal experts note that royal household employment practices must comply with British employment law and anti-discrimination requirements, despite traditional royal privileges and protocols that have historically governed staff relationships. Employment disputes harassment allegations, and questions about working conditions within royal households have sometimes resulted in legal proceedings requiring examination of royal household management practices and the involvement of senior royal family members in staff oversight. The responsibility of royal family members for household management decisions and their knowledge of staff treatment could potentially be relevant to legal proceedings involving employment-related allegations or disputes. The implications could suggest that staff-related legal matters might require Charles and Camilla to provide testimony about their knowledge of and involvement in household management decisions and staff treatment issues. The charitable activities and patronages of royal family members involve extensive financial and organizational relationships that could potentially be subjects of legal examination. If questions arise about charitable management, financial irregularities, or the proper use of royal influence in charitable contexts, the oversight of royal charitable activities, and the use of royal names and influence in charitable fundraising and operations have been subjects of regulatory scrutiny and could potentially be relevant to legal proceedings involving charitable governance or financial management. Legal experts note that charitable activities involving royal patronage must comply with charity law and regulatory requirements, and questions about compliance or financial management could potentially require royal testimony about their knowledge and involvement in charitable operations. The relationship between royal charitable activities and personal interests or business relationships could potentially be subject to legal examination if questions arise about conflicts of interest or the improper use of charitable resources or royal influence. Questions arise about whether charitable-related legal matters might require Charles and Camilla to provide testimony about their charitable activities, financial oversight, or knowledge of charitable operations and management. The international activities and relationships of the British royal family involve extensive diplomatic, business, and personal connections that could potentially be subjects of legal examination in various international legal contexts. The role of royal family members in international relations, trade relationships, and diplomatic activities could potentially be relevant to legal proceedings involving questions about government policy, international agreements, or the proper use of royal influence in international contexts. Legal challenges involving international business relationships, diplomatic activities, or questions about royal involvement in international affairs could potentially require royal testimony about their knowledge and involvement in international activities. Monarchs could potentially be subject to legal examination, particularly in contexts involving reparations, apologies, or other forms of historical accountability. Constitutional questions about the continuing legitimacy of royal authority in light of historical actions and their contemporary consequences could potentially require royal testimony about their understanding of historical responsibility and contemporary obligations. Questions arise about whether historical accountability issues might require Charles and Camilla to provide testimony about their knowledge of historical royal actions, their attitudes toward historical grievances, or their positions on contemporary demands for historical accountability. The personal conduct and private behavior of royal family members has been subject to various forms of legal examination, particularly when private conduct might affect public duties or involve potential legal violations. Legal experts note that royal family members are subject to ordinary criminal and civil law, despite their constitutional positions, and questions about personal conduct could potentially be relevant to legal proceedings involving various forms of legal liability or public accountability. The relationship between private conduct and public responsibilities could potentially be subject to legal examination if questions arise about how personal behavior affects the discharge of constitutional duties. duties, or public confidence in royal institutions. Privacy protections for royal family members must be balanced against legal requirements and public interest considerations when personal conduct becomes relevant to legal proceedings or constitutional questions. The implications could suggest that personal conduct issues might require Charles and Camilla provide testimony about their private behavior, decision-making, or knowledge of matters affecting their public responsibilities and constitutional roles. The security arrangements and protective measures for royal family members involve extensive coordination with government agencies and could potentially be subjects of legal examination if questions arise about security practices, costs, or effectiveness. Legal challenges to royal security arrangements, including questions about costs, necessity, coordination with government security services, could potentially require examination of royal knowledge and involvement in security decision-making. The relationship between royal security requirements and public costs has been subject to political and legal scrutiny, with questions about the appropriate level and cost of royal protection in contemporary circumstances, constitutional questions about the responsibility for royal security and the proper coordination between royal household management and government security services could potentially be relevant to legal proceedings involving security-related issues. Questions arise about whether security-related legal matters might require Charles and Camilla provide testimony about their security arrangements, costs, or knowledge of security practices and procedures. The technological and communication systems used by royal family members have become subjects of legal interest in various contexts, including cybersecurity, privacy protection, and the management of digital communications and records. Legal experts note that royal communications and digital records could potentially be relevant to various legal proceedings, requiring examination of how royal family members manage their technological systems and digital communications. The security and privacy of royal technological systems have been subjects of government and legal scrutiny, particularly given the potential national security implications of compromised royal communications or cybersecurity vulnerabilities. Constitutional questions about the ownership and management of royal digital communications and records could potentially be relevant to legal proceedings involving access to royal information or the preservation of royal records. The implications could suggest that technology-related legal matters might require Charles, Camilla, to provide testimony about their use of technological systems, digital communications, or knowledge of cybersecurity and privacy protection measures. The education and development programs supported by royal family members involve extensive relationships with educational institutions and could potentially be subjects of legal examination if questions arise about educational funding, governance, or the proper use of royal influence in educational contexts. The involvement of royal family members in educational institutions through patronages, funding, governance roles creates relationships that could potentially be relevant to legal proceedings involving educational management, financial oversight, or institutional governance. Legal challenges to educational institutions with royal connections could potentially require examination of royal involvement in institutional decision-making, financial oversight, or governance practices. The relationship between royal educational activities and government education policy could potentially be subject to legal examination if questions arise about the proper coordination of royal activities with government educational objectives. Questions arise about whether education-related legal matters might require Charles and Camilla to provide testimony about their educational activities, institutional relationships, or knowledge of educational governance and management practices. The healthcare activities and patronages of royal family members involve relationships with healthcare institutions and organizations that could potentially be subjects of legal examination if questions arise about healthcare governance, funding, or the proper use of royal influence in healthcare contexts. The involvement of royal family members in healthcare institutions through patronages and support activities creates relationships that could potentially be relevant to legal proceedings involving healthcare management, patient care, or institutional governance. Legal challenges to healthcare institutions with royal connections could potentially require examination of royal knowledge and involvement in healthcare decision-making, financial oversight, or governance practices. The relationship between royal healthcare activities and government health policy could potentially be subject to legal examination if questions arise about the proper coordination of royal activities with government healthcare objectives. The implications could suggest that healthcare-related legal matters might require Charles and Camilla to provide testimony about their healthcare activities, institutional relationships, or knowledge of healthcare governance and patient care practices. The environmental activities and conservation efforts supported by royal family members have been subjects of political and legal interest, particularly given the relationship between royal environmental advocacy and government environmental policy. The extensive environmental activities of Charles, including his long-standing advocacy for organic farming, climate change action, and conservation efforts, could potentially be relevant to legal proceedings involving environmental policy, land use, or conservation practices. Legal challenges to environmental policies or conservation practices involving royal estates or activities could potentially require examination of royal decision-making, environmental management, or the use of royal influence in environmental contexts. The relationship between royal environmental activities and government environmental policy could potentially be subject to legal examination if questions arise about the proper coordination of royal advocacy with government environmental objectives. Questions arise about whether environmental-related legal matters might require Charles and Camilla to provide testimony about their environmental activities, conservation practices, or knowledge of environmental management and policy development. The cultural activities and artistic patronages of royal family members involve extensive relationships with cultural institutions and could potentially be subjects of legal examination if questions arise about cultural funding, governance, or the proper use of royal influence in cultural contexts. The involvement of royal family members in cultural institutions through patronages and support activities creates relationships that could potentially be relevant to legal proceedings involving cultural management, artistic freedom, or institutional governance. Legal challenges to cultural institutions with royal connections could potentially require examination of royal knowledge and involvement in cultural decision-making, financial oversight, or governance practices affecting artistic and cultural activities. The relationship between royal cultural activities and government cultural policy could potentially be subject to legal examination if questions arise about the proper coordination of royal activities with government cultural objectives and funding priorities. The implications could suggest that culture-related legal matters might require Charles and Camilla to provide testimony about their cultural activities, institutional relationships, or knowledge of cultural governance and artistic management practices. The agricultural activities and land management practices on royal estates involve extensive business operations that could potentially be subjects of legal examination if questions arise about land use, environmental impact, or agricultural business practices. The management of royal agricultural operations, including organic farming initiatives and conservation practices, could potentially be relevant to legal proceedings involving agricultural policy, environmental regulation, or land use planning. Legal challenges to agricultural practices on royal estates could potentially require examination of royal decision-making about land management, environmental conservation, or the use of agricultural land for various purposes. The relationship between royal agricultural activities and government agricultural policy potentially be subject to legal examination if questions arise about the proper coordination of royal land management with government agricultural and environmental objectives. The sports and recreational activities supported by royal family members involve relationships with sporting organizations and could potentially be subjects of legal examination if questions arise about sporting governance, funding, or the proper use of royal influence in sporting contexts. The involvement of royal family members in sporting institutions through patronages and support activities creates relationships that could potentially be relevant to legal proceedings involving sporting management, athlete welfare, or institutional governance. Legal challenges to sporting institutions with royal connections could potentially require examination, royal knowledge, and involvement in sporting decision-making, financial oversight, or governance practices affecting athletic activities and competitions. The relationship between royal sporting activities and government sports policy could potentially be subject to legal examination if questions arise about the proper coordination of royal activities with government sporting objectives and funding priorities. The implications could suggest that sports-related legal matters might require Charles and Camilla to provide testimony about their sporting activities, institutional relationships, or knowledge of sporting governance and athletic management practices. The religious activities and ecclesiastical relationships of royal family members involve constitutional responsibilities and could potentially be subjects of legal examination if questions arise about religious freedom, ecclesiastical governance, or the proper exercise of royal religious authority. The role of Charles as Supreme Governor of the Church of England creates constitutional responsibilities that could potentially be relevant to legal proceedings involving religious freedom, ecclesiastical law, or the relationship between church and state. Legal challenges to religious practices or ecclesiastical decisions involving royal authority could potentially require examination of royal understanding of religious responsibilities, ecclesiastical governance, or the proper exercise of religious authority in contemporary contexts. The relationship between royal religious responsibilities and contemporary religious freedom equality requirements could potentially be subject to legal examination if questions arise about the compatibility of royal religious authority with modern legal and constitutional principles. Questions arise about whether religious-related legal matters might require Charles and Camilla to provide testimony about their religious activities, ecclesiastical relationships, or knowledge of religious governance and contemporary religious freedom requirements. As this unprecedented situation continues to develop, questions remain about the full extent of what Charles and Camilla's testimony might reveal, and how their explanations might affect the future of the British monarchy and its relationship with the British people and Commonwealth nations. The legal and constitutional implications of royal court testimony extend far beyond the specific circumstances that required their appearance, potentially establishing new precedents for royal accountability and the relationship between the monarchy and the legal system in democratic societies. The public and media response to royal court testimony would likely be intensive and could significantly affect public opinion about the monarchy, royal family members, and the continued Relevance of royal institutions in contemporary British and Commonwealth society. The resolution of whatever legal matters required. Royal testimony could provide important insights in the evolving role of constitutional monarchy in modern democratic societies, and the balance between royal privilege and legal accountability. The broader implications for understanding royal responsibilities, constitutional limitations, and the proper relationship between monarchy and law will likely continue to influence discussions about the future of royal institutions and their role in contemporary governance and society. If you're as shocked by these unprecedented royal revelations as we are, go ahead and like this video. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about the possibility of royal family members being required to testify in court? How should the balance between royal privilege and legal accountability be maintained in modern democratic societies? We want to hear your perspective on the evolving role of monarchy in contemporary legal and constitutional contexts. Then, hit subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss our coverage of royal family developments and the changing relationship between traditional institutions and modern legal requirements. Thanks for watching.